I'm sorry the sound quality is not very good on this interview, and my face is in a tiny, tiny, tiny box with a label, Gadget UK, on top of it. Yeah, it was my first time trying to record Skype.
Hello. Hi, Stephen. Fantastic. Can you see me okay?
Yeah, I can see you fine, yeah.
Wow, your living room looks fantastic with the Christmas tree there, the guitar on the window.
This is my office.
Wow, what a lovely office.
Yeah. I was looking back at my videos. I haven't done a video since June. I can't believe that. It's like...
Yeah, it's finding the time, isn't it? But it's got to be in the right place, I think, to do online stuff, you know, where you...
Yeah. Since I've moved, I really haven't got the setup for it. So I was completely sympathising with you when you moved into your new space. Because I was like, yeah, I know exactly how you feel, because everything was set up just how you wanted it. And you've had to move. And now your productivity, stuff that would have just taken you 15 minutes max, is taking you a whole day.
Yeah.
Just because you've had to go and change everything about. And yeah, it takes a wee while to get into the zone. And I just, there's so much, because this house there's so much to do. It's just, the lab has been the last thing on the list to get sorted out, to be honest. So,
and your lab's massive.
The lab is massive, but it's unheated and there's big vents out. It's basement space. So there's vents so if I heat that space, the heat just goes straight out the vents. So at the moment, my wife is getting her attic converted, and I think I've sent you some pictures of the attic space and all that. There's 4 massive Velux windows going in there, and then all of the crap that's in the basement that's sitting in my space will go up to her space, and then I can move all of my stuff out of the lab. And I'm going to actually gut it, completely rip the walls, everything, the floor, everything out of it.
Right.
That's why I'm trying not to buy any more cabs right now, because it's big. And then what I'll do is I'll put in some underfloor heating.
Yeah.
Concrete over the underfloor heating. I will either underfloor heating or radiators, but then I'll just do what I did to that games room for the arcade machines.
Yeah.
Just that big space, sort it all out. But it used to be a recording studio for someone who ran a radio station out of there, and the floor is raised up. And
right.
But I'm 6'2", and that guy was 5'4", so I hit my head off things. So I want get the I don't need the acoustic shielding the way he did.
Yeah.
So there's like 2 bits to the basement. There's the bit where the cabs are, which was originally going to be my lab, but then Ollie convinced me to buy some. Well, he used
his charm and persuasion.
Look at that cab, look at that, and I'm not interested. Then he sent me some videos of it working. I was like, oh, you arse, you. I'm gonna have to buy the cabs are in there, and then next door, I've moved into the lab. But it's been good having everything laid out. But the thing is, it's also, you just go past something and go, ooh, I haven't looked at that for a while, and sometimes it would be better. Yeah, it's a distraction. So. There's also a bona fide bomb shelter in the basement as well, which where I'm to put some racking and put all my stuff and get it all stored up. So it's an amazing basement, and then you can flow straight out into a heated garage, which is where all the workies are storing their junk and crap. So, but that all starts up again next year. So, yeah, there's a lot of work in this house. But the only reason I can even think about doing this is because my mother-in-law moved in with us.
Yeah.
And so we kind of combined 2 houses.
All under the one house, yeah.
One house, because she's getting older. Her husband, my father-in-law's passed away. So, we wanted to... And she didn't really like living where he liked living, but it was all right together. But once he passed away, then it was... Yeah. So we've moved into here, and we can look after her, and as she gets older. Plus, it's a wee bit of free childcare as well. So
that's got to be a good thing.
Yeah. So that's the story of the house. It'll be another year until it's sorted all out, I think.
Yeah, I'm drinking from my TerribleFire mug here. It's one of those huge ones.
I loved that mug. I had one myself, and unfortunately, all of the artwork has come off it because I keep putting it in the dishwasher. It's a big white mug now.
It just reminded me of something, actually. When I was trying to add you in on Skype, I noticed the spelling of your surname. I've made that mistake before, haven't I? Because remember, you flagged me up on it. You said, there's no E on the end there.
Actually,
I see it everywhere, though. I looked on Google before I put your name in the credits on the TFMSX Part 1.
Yeah.
and everyone seems to keep making that mistake. And I'm part of the equation here, so I'm going to correct this in part 3.
Actually, it's a bit of karma, I suppose, because if you look on the TFMSX, I type Banjo Gaioli. I called him Bango Gaioli, and forgive me, he's really annoyed with that. I actually sent Ollie a message last night saying it's a bit of karma. My name keeps getting spelt wrong, but because I got you, because I Bango Gaioli.
Yeah, so I guess that's a good place to start. Actually, talking about Banjo Gaioli. What I was going to ask, what was the motivation to work on the TFMSX? Did you own an MSX? And I know the answer is Banjo Gaioli was.
Well, it was because he had done so many covers of so many cool MSX games, and I'd never seen the system. I'd never. I know, obviously, somebody said MSX, and you're like, yeah, Z80 machine, but I'd never seen the games. I'd never really taken an interest in it until I saw the covers, and when I met people at Amiga 37 who didn't know Banjo Gaioli is 8-bit Manshed.
Yeah.
And it's quite impressive what he's got on in terms of his covers. If you haven't seen them, go and see them. Absolutely.
Yeah, they're absolutely amazing.
But also his arcade 8-bit Manshed channel is phenomenal as well. It's just...
Yeah, he's multi-skilled, isn't he?
Yeah. Don't tell him that. Don't tell him that.
So are you. You're a pilot as well, aren't you?
Yeah, well, we'll get to that. So what was happening was, Ollie had and there's a few people on one of the chat groups that he's in were really into their MSX stuff. And MSX seems to be as much of a theme for Ollie as Amiga. So I thought, well, I'll have a look at this system, and I saw some of the games, and I was thinking, do you know, actually, that system's not that difficult. I could probably put it on a board the same size as the 4060. Yeah. So it was more of a needing a break from Amiga for a bit. I thought I'd just do Doodle, just do a schematic, see how hard is it. Yeah, it didn't look very hard. I got a schematic up for it, a basic schematic up for what I thought would work in a day. And applying the same sort of, how do I put it? I try and get rid of all of the things that make a board expensive.
Yeah.
Necessarily expensive in terms of materials, but definitely expensive in terms of time to manufacture. You want it to be as easy as possible for Joe Bloggs just to be able to build it. There might be a lot of surface stuff. So I think Ollie was originally quite resistant to the surface mount stuff because he doesn't like surface mount. He moans and complains. I don't know. Well, sort of that in that French Irish accent of his, but. And he was, no surface mount. I said, well, what we can do is we set it up so that all the surface mounts on one side, so you can pre-assemble it.
Yeah.
And then, Joe Plummer or whoever wants to come along and make it, or some random YouTuber. What we'll do is we'll just put all the through-hole stuff, so the through-hole stuff will be left, and you just put the through-hole stuff on, and that's it. And you can grab it, and that was the basic premise, and also wanted to get it as small as possible to make it as cheap as possible. I suppose I could have made it bigger than that. I don't know why I made it but it was just
I don't know. I think it's perfect size-wise. I
think actually it's what fits on my license for Eagle. Actually, that standard license of Eagle, it fits in that space exactly, that allowed space. So for 4 layers. So I just went with that, and I'd never owned an MSX when I started the whole process of schematic.
Did you get any as part of this, or?
So I did the very first prototype, the really, really first prototype, and then one of the guys in the local Amiga group, John McDermott, him and somebody else got this massive haul. And there's an actual story behind. Somebody should talk about this at some point. But he approached somebody on Facebook who was selling something for like £2.50, and it was worth 3,000 quid or something. It wasn't those, but it was a big difference. And he was saying, that's worth a lot more than you're selling it for. And they said, well, actually, I'm a widow, or I'm a partner of somebody who's away. I've got this massive collection. So I think they settled on a price for the whole lot, but they both had. It was like a garage full of stuff. It was both of them had.
Sounds like a dream pickup.
So John said, he was going to try and make sure that they got to the people who would appreciate them for reasonable prices, not sky-high prices, not price gouging prices. So John did that. And John had an MSX, an HX10. And, I would mention, I'm building an MSX. I think it was motivated by, can you take something off my hands? Because I've got and I got an HX10 boxed with a tape deck,
Nice.
pretty good condition, no games or anything. And then Ollie sent me some games, exactly those carts that you have. He sent me some of them.
Yeah.
Just the sort of nice top 5 games, and I think the HX10 arrived before the TFMSX, and so at least I had. Yeah. But I designed my own MSX before ever owning one, which I think is probably quite.
That's quite incredible, really. Yeah.
So they and then I got myself an MSX2. So I've got a Sony MSX2 Fitbit one, the one that looks a bit like an Amiga, but it's
yeah. The first one you mentioned, the first one you picked up, that's quite a popular model. I know quite a few people have got that.
Yeah,
I don't know it sold really well here in the UK because the MSX wasn't that popular here, was it, compared to a lot of the the things like the Sinclair and the Amstrad?
I think it was just market saturation here with those other platforms. It never got enough traction to get going, which is a shame. But I think it would have been a lot more expensive than things that Sinclair and Amstrad and these guys were pushing. But at the same time, it's from the manufacturers you'd have expected to be producing computers, and it was kind of a standard. Whereas all of these, everything from it's one of the things that does my head in a little bit in the 80s. Everybody did their own OS, everybody did their own hardware completely, and it was a complete platform. And I like the standard thing about the MSX. The MSX was standardized, had certain points standardized. I think it was a great idea, because I don't know. As soon as your vendor goes bust for whatever reason, and eventually they all do.
Yeah.
Your platform is defunct.
It ends. Yeah. And that kind of leads on to a question I had as well, is that in terms of the design of this, I take it you use some of the technical documentation that's out there that sort of defines the MSX, and that maybe was, gave you a head start.
Yeah, I mean, it's not hard. You go and find Google for MSX schematic. I mean, this isn't a hard thing to do. It's just one of those things that you have to sit down and actually do. And I think it was just an exercise. And I think it's a lot of people do say that about all of my stuff. It's that's not hard. My daughter could do it before breakfast. Well, why didn't you? Why didn't you do it then? It's
exactly. It's one thing to say something. It's another thing to do it and actually achieve it.
The devil is ultimately in the detail. Because it comes and you've got a design and you think, that's fantastic. That's the broad strokes are easy because you go and find them online. I mean, I made some seriously huge mistakes on this first one. None of them. There was no. I wired up the joystick ports completely wrong. Completely. I kind of see that where I've had to sort of fix it by putting some of those 7.4 series logic chips. That's to correct that mistake. Things like I didn't know. I didn't realize until I saw your video, and it's probably the only reason I'm getting away with it is because I've got real CRTs. Is that the 9958 has got 4 volts on the C-Sync line instead of.
The Commodore monitors are going to be quite happy with that.
Yeah, it's perfectly happy with that. So it's stuff like that. Until you start going through it, and then each iteration of that board has been 250 quid for 5. So that's up. Well, 500 quid at least in boards, and that's the reason people don't do it, because you just got to have the commitment to.
It's time and money.
And then you've got to chase up people like, I've got to get one to you, I've got to get one to Ollie, I've got to get one to Eric. Goose has got one, he's not built it yet. So there's 5 of them out there, including the one I have here.
I'm super grateful. It's made my Christmas playing around with this. So
fantastic.
Thank you ever so much.
But that's the whole point. It's just, I want to give the early ones to people who will find the bugs, because not someone who'll throw it in a cupboard. And I had to give one to Eric, definitely, because he needed one to do the dev work on. Ollie, of course, had to have one because he's got so many cards. He's got so much original hardware. He can sit and compare things side by side.
Yeah,
he's got he sent me an SCC cart as well to do some testing with, because that's not working. What I was wanting to get from you was the experience of building it, which looked really, really painful, I have to say.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that was self-inflicted though,
I'm so
because
sorry, Chris.
yeah, if I'd taken what was the word? If I'd taken lessons, from previous, well, if I'd taken information from previous lessons that, in fact, you'd posted some comments on previous videos saying the same thing. Don't put your through-hole stuff on until you've got all your SMT stuff. And I'm fully aware of this, but you know what it's like. Well, I know what it's like for me. Sometimes I get the components in front of me, I'm missing some components, and I think, I don't want to waste any time. I'm just going to put what I've got on there, knowing that it's going to create me some problems.
So the first revision of the board, the absolute first revision, came with the CPLD on and the ARM on already.
Right, that's good.
And the reason I didn't do that for the second run is because the prices of them had quadrupled. 5 of those STM32s, I think we reused all the STM32s from the first batch.
Yeah.
5 of them STM32s on the second batch, pre-mounted on the boards, and we're looking at 500 quid.
Oh, good God.
It was just taking the mickey. So
yeah.
The idea was that these are supposed to come with the STM32s and the CPLDs already on them, and it should just be the through-hole stuff, as I said. And then, of course, I've made some complete. I managed to get the joystick port on backwards, which I was like, how did I even manage to do that? In fact, it was Eric that noticed that. He goes, I think that's backwards. I've unsoldered it and put it back on, and it works. I was like, oh,
I quite like that though. It's like I say, for me, it's turned out to be a feature because initially, obviously, the board was sort of lopsided, but as soon as I stick some of those little things underneath it, it sits quite nice now off the table. So
yeah, I'm gonna try and find some room for some standoffs or some mount on it. It's very difficult because it's a very busy board, and there's some physical constraints around those edge connectors because I can't really put a hole or a cap too close to where those cartridges could land on top of them.
Yeah.
I think if I grab this one here, I've actually millimeter perfect got the first version of the board. Let me show you this. I think I've got it millimeter perfect. If you see on yourself, it's like the card will slot in, and it's like there's like a tiny gap between the ROM socket. There's like
right.
it's
precision as things stand. Yeah.
It really, yeah, and then. I was hoping to try and find a way to get a cap. But I could probably put a cap in there so that it'll fit inside the gap in here. But that's the sort of level of which I'm trying to find space on this board because it's to try and keep it. Yeah, the MSX community keep asking me, and people who are really quite big in the MSX community have asked me things like, so what parts do you need from a real MSX? What logic chips do you need? I was like, You don't need to break a real MSX to make this at all. You just order I went with the Atari ST chip because it's actually cheaper than the AY.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that.
The AY chips, because they're Spectrums. I think Spectrums, Amstrads, and a whole bunch of other machines have them. They are quite expensive to get, and I think they may be used in some synths as well. The Yamaha clones of them, I'm only aware of the Atari ST using them. They sound just as good, although there are people obviously out there who say that they don't. There's completely difference between them. But and I had a big stock of the AY, the Yamaha ones for Atari ST remake stuff. So I just decided to use that one just for cost. Everything has been done for cost, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think that's a good thing. It makes it totally affordable and easy to get parts and things. Because that's what you want to look at as well, is the large supplies of things rather than obscure things where the prices go nuts. And in fact, that's exactly what's happened with the TF stuff, isn't it? The 060s. The point I was going to make there is the 060s. That's your fault. The fact that those have become really expensive, super expensive, because demand. It's just supply and demand. So many people wanting to put them on TerribleFire boards. This is the thing. So the same thing's probably going to happen with the TFMSX now. You watch the VDPs. In fact, I've seen the sellers already start to increase the prices of the VDPs.
this is why people go onto forums and say, where can we get legit stuff? Where do I get a cheap? Where do I get a good deal? Things like the 060. I say, if you want to get a real 060, a genuine 060 that you're guaranteed for, you go to Chucky.
Yes, yeah.
He sent me a picture of an invoice that he did buying 060s yesterday, and it's high. It's almost into five figures in terms of 060s he's buying. So how many?
Those all work.
So I joked with him and I said, "Oh, so is that for one or two?" And I don't want to say the number because I haven't checked with him, but he's bought some 060s, and what he does is he'll take the hit. So he'll buy them at X, and if there's dead ones, he'll take that hit. If you want to roll the dice and get the really good price, you might, but you've probably got a 1 in 5 chance of getting a completely dead one.
Yeah, yeah. And it's about the mask and the revision and everything, isn't it? Because sometimes you're told it's a Rev 6 and ends up being a Rev 1 or a Rev 5 or something,
We see them, they reprint all now. Even they reprint Rev 6. They've sussed that we've spotted.
Yeah, there's demand for it.
But then this is why I say on the forums is that don't have a forum where you discuss it, because the Chinese suppliers, they look on the forums, they figure out what it is we're looking for, and they then do it. So it's
crazy, isn't it? You'd think if there's that much motivation to try and make all this money, why don't they start manufacturing 060s again? It can't be that hard.
Well, I think there's licensing and all that sort of stuff involved in that, and it's probably possible, but yeah, the first time I really realized I was having an effect on the price of things was when I think 2016 you could buy a CD32 for 90 quid with a power supply.
Yeah.
And
I saw them cheaper than that.
And a year later they're 200.
Yeah. Before you got involved with the 328, I was looking on eBay, and frequently I was seeing them for sort of £40 to £50, and then you got on with what's the 328, wasn't it, the first one, the RAM?
That's all.
Yeah, and then as you say, they shot up to like 90, a year later 200. Now they're like £400 ish for a CD32.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
It's completely crazy, but the machine's got a new lease of life now, which is a good thing. So
yeah. I'm going to do some CD32 stuff soon, actually, so I'll be looking back at the 328. In fact, I've got a 328 to build. I think it came from Stefan. So, because I haven't built one. I've shown one on my channel, but I never built one of those, so yeah, I'll be covering that. So, the TFMSX, how long did it take you to create? Because it seems to have almost come from nowhere, like really quick.
I haven't spent a lot of time on it, I'll be honest. Although it has been around for it's been around for at least 2 years now. No, it was about 2 years ago I started making it. I was doodling it back when I was in my old house. I think I got the first prototype when I was back in my old house. Got it working. At least got it booting. MSX, the MSX1 stuff. And I basically didn't know anything about the MSX when the prototype board landed on my door. All I did was I wired up everything to every wire I could think of in the circuit, in the system, to PLD, and I said, I'll figure the rest out later. And that's pretty much what happened. Is just I figured out how primary slots work, how secondary slots work, how memory mappers work, and all that sort of stuff. I had no idea how they worked before when I designed the board. I just knew that if everything came to one place...
Yeah, so you had that forethought, really, just to centralise everything into the CPLD and then take it from there.
So that's how I did it, and I thought, well, if I have a 28, I run everything... And normally on the TF cards, I run everything off either a 50 or a 100 megahertz clock. Both the O's are all off 100 megahertz clock, and the clock divided down. And there's usually on the 06 cards, there's something that will do a clock multiply. But I just decided that 28 megahertz could then be divided down to the 7 megahertz expected clock frequency. And that was about it. And I made some massive mistakes with it, and obviously ended up with loads of patch wires on the first one. Second one, you don't have as many patch wires. You've got things where you have to short out caps because they were in the wrong place. The audio circuit's going to need a complete redesign. I finally found a good audio circuit to copy from one of the Sony MSXs, that sort of thing.
Yeah. I was thinking about doing a mod to the audio side actually, because that same chip on the Atari ST, you got 3 channels, haven't you? There's 3 audio channels. I mean, it's a PSG, but for the most part, the no sample stuff's done. I shouldn't really be saying that. I really should be looking at some of the library first to work out if any of the games out there actually play samples. But point I'm trying to make is you can separate the channels. Well, have two of the channels separate and merge the third channel across the left and right effectively and have stereo. So I might try and do that as a mod, but
it might be worth. See, if I was going to do something like that, I'd go and see if somebody else had done that on a real.
on an actual MSX.
So I would know which channels to do that with.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's reasonable. Yeah, I would say. Yeah.
But I mean, this is the thing. I mean, it's just the same as modding an actual MSX, because that's the first thing I would do if I got an MSX.
Yeah.
But that's just me liking stereo. You mentioned the problem with the ports and stuff. What other sort of challenges did you have? Did you have anything else that really you got stumped with, or mistakes?
Yeah, huge ones. I didn't realize the VDP had a clock output. I thought it was a clock input.
So it's news to me. I didn't know either.
So the VDP generates a clock for an MSX. It's mad. So I had early on, I could barely get the VDP to work. Could barely get the Z80 to work, and I started looking at my clock lines, and it looked like it was ringing like a. I mean, the ringing was incredible. It was ringing like a, I was looking at it with one of my friends, and he was going to get me. I can't remember the name of the name of it, but he was going to get me a subscription to the Church Bell Ringing Society. And I was like, "Wow, that's impressive. I've never seen that kind of ringing off a 3.3 because it was a 3.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at it. I'm going, well, so I modded on a clock buffer, thinking that might help, and something to do with that. Made it worse, and I eventually realised that I've got 2 clock out.
2 clocks overlapping. He thought it was harmonics or something.
And it would work sometimes, but it would only probably work when the 2 of them were actually completely in phase and working. So yeah,
that's the sort of mistake I think I would have made.
Yeah, but then it didn't make sense to me that a video chip would be producing a CPU clock. But that's the level of thought I didn't put into it. If I didn't really go write everything down, know everything. Because if you go and try and figure out every detail before you get a prototype, you'll never build it. You'll be there forever. You'll be so
constantly changing, constantly being put off by problems.
And that's what I see in the forums with people who, or at least I used to see and frustrate me in the forums. People wanting to build a card for the Amiga, wanting to build a card for an Atari, wanting to build something, and they've got all these ideas.
Yeah, they're just not actually getting on with it,
and then somebody else would come along, and that other person would say, "Well, that won't work because." And I was just like, "Well, just try it. Just put it. Do you know that for sure that won't work? The only way you're going to know for sure it won't work is if you try it."
Yeah.
And 9 times out of 10, all of these things. The one thing that I think I have done in my time is dispel a lot of urban legends about what does and what doesn't work on the because people would say this is how this works and this is how that works, and Frontier uses the biggest one I always used to hear was Frontier uses an FPU, like literally put a logic analyzer on the chip select for the FPU.
Yeah,
it's not wiggling.
It's amazing how many of those little urban legends just come to light, isn't it?
People love little stories like, Frontier will go faster with an FPU, and it's a placebo effect. People plug in an FPU and think, it's going faster, but it's not.
So the ARM stuff, did you plan that in right at the start with the very first proto, or was that something you came to look at with the second one, and how did Arik become involved?
So Arik is part of the Scottish Amiga user group.
Right.
He's across in Edinburgh.
Yeah.
They come through. So we have meetups in this room.
Okay, cool.
This is.
I need to move to Scotland.
part of the reason I've resisted the my wife and my mother-in-law putting furniture in here and having sofas in here is because I like to have meetups in here.
Yeah.
So they come through, we meet up and what have you. But Eric and I were working on the riser for the CD32
Oh yeah, yeah.
and that's where the circuit came from. So literally, that's lifted from that.
Okay, that's quite cool. Yeah, so for
Right.
anybody
Well,
who's not aware, it's the riser that fits on the back of the CD32 to fit the TF330. You did a mod, didn't you? Well, you didn't do a mod. You created a custom riser that had keyboard support, and I think you did some stuff with the video as well, didn't you?
yeah. So this one is the standard one that you get. Everybody has it. It's the Kipper 2K
Yeah.
one they call it. It's this isn't mine, but this one plugs into the CD32 and accelerators plug in here, and then there's a keyboard, a PS2 keyboard on it, and a PIC and a 23-pin DIN on it.
Yeah.
I was thinking, but the motivation, the main motivation on that one for me was that the FMV, which I have thanks to Super Duper, that doesn't work off the 23-pin D. So I was like, well, I'm going to have to design a new riser to make that work. And from that, I was thinking, right, well, we might as well do a better job of the keyboard. So I was talking to Alec, and he was hankering for an STM32 project, and we had a chat back and forth about a few things. And he was like, "Well, no, I can write ahead." And I mean, I'm a software engineer for a living, so I don't want to be writing code in my spare time. So on you go. You go write C code, and I'll do the hardware. And there is some bugs still in that one. We have to go back and visit it again.
Yeah.
Oh, my internet's Starlink, by the way, so it does sometimes crap
Yeah,
out.
it just broke up a little bit there, but yeah, I caught that. Yeah, so there's a few bugs in these. I still.
Yeah, so we need to maybe do a new spin of that one, but it's lower down my queue because nobody's asking for it.
Yeah.
But so just basically lifted I said, well, look, I'm doing this TFMSX, and you've done all this work for the HID compatibility on the. Can you just make it work like this? And and he was able to get it. It's the same circuit, but it's just how it interfaces with the system is slightly different. So I said, I'll do it like this. And we designed it so that when the Z80 asks for a specific port, it triggers an interrupt. The ARM then puts the right bit of keyboard matrix on the bus, and the ARM is so much faster than the Z80 we can get away with it. It seems to work perfectly, but it's an interrupt driven. I write whenever I write. I think how the keyboard works is you write to which row you want to read, and then you read the row. So when the row is written, an interrupt is triggered, and the ARM just puts the right data back onto the CPLD, and the CPLD presents that to the Z80.
Yeah, that's quite cool.
So it's not complicated, but the complicated bit is writing the HID and making it work, because that will work with hubs, I believe, I think.
Yeah. The way that's implemented at the moment, is there any way it could be extended to do anything else in the system? I know you talked about you've got an RTC stuff, so you've got some RTC stuff.
It could. I think it would probably just take me and Eric sitting down together where we haven't been drinking and looking at other people's because it's always good fun to we always tend to meet up when there's always really cool computers around, and we get distracted by that. There's loads of lines spare between the CPLD and the ARM, so we could do.
I'm just thinking about some of the SCC stuff and other sound hardware. Is there any way that any of that could be maybe emulated in the ARM or?
Yeah, I had actually set up the ARM so that it could pump out sound onto the. It was actually causing trouble. It was actually causing problems with the sound doing that. So it's one of the caps I got you to remove. I think it's cap 53. But it's.
I think I might know what that is. Is it an open collector output or something? That sound chip. Because I vaguely remember when I did a modification to my ST that there's something funny about the output of that sound chip, that if you try and merge other sound with it, you can end up with no sound. I think you had to stick some pull downs or something on the outputs. I'll have a think back about that, but I am sure there's something a bit strange about the output of that YM2149 that you try and mix other audio in, you get no audio.
Yeah, that would be useful because I'm having issues with the
the SCC.
So the SCC on things like Spirit of F1 that works, but then there's an FPGA implementation of the SEC on some of the what they call Mega Flash ROM or something. I could be getting that completely wrong, but that isn't working at all, and I'm going to have to sort of trace back. So I've been checking that the SEC is being seen using things like Tiny Slot Checker. Yes, Tiny Slot Checker can tell you the configuration of your system. So I was just checking that I could see the fake SEC and that was working. So I need to just. I've got an analog problem. The circuit I picked up to do the amp is the same circuit that they're using in the H5 Atari ST clone. So that would be mixing sound from a couple of different sources from the same chip, from the YM. That's why I picked it, because Exos had something kicking about that was doing that, but there's some issues, so I just need to sit and go through the analog. So that's really all that's left for me to figure out on this board after you've done all that work now on the all that work figuring out the VDPs for me. All I have to figure out now is the SCC stuff. Yeah. That's not working, getting a good audio circuit. And I found one, and I might just build it on a breadboard and just check it that way instead of fly leads onto a breadboard and just check it works. Or maybe just do a tiny little circuit before I respin the whole thing.
One of the problems I've had with this from the start is once I started playing with the MSX2 Plus ROM, I think I made some assumptions. I assumed you were using the same chip as me in 9938.
I was swapping between them, to be honest. But I'm using a CM8833 Mark II.
Right.
Or I'm using real monitors.
Yeah.
And the reason I've got real monitors is because I've got arcade machines to debug now, and I want to be using real RGB inputs, and there's not even you've got the TV with this that can switch between composite and RGB.
Yeah.
I don't have anything like that. I've just got real RGB monitors.
As best thing really. You've seen what my TV keeps doing. It keeps squashing up at the top.
Yeah, so I've got some spare open frame monitors for the arcade machines, So, and one of the when we have meetups here, one of the lads says, "Open frame CRTs and beer. What could go wrong?" It was I've been switching between them, but I'm using a real RGB monitor, so that might have been half the reason that I'm seeing things and you're not. The thing I'm using, by the way, is a 1 amp.
Oh, that's what I was going to ask you. Power supply.
1 amp 5 volt power supply with less than a meter lead on it.
Yeah.
I don't know where I got it, but it's one of these things. I have a bucket of these, but I checked them. I went for 1 amp.
Right, that's what I'll get then. Because what I tried to do is be clever, and I thought I'm going to get a decent branded power supply. So I got a Sony 5 volt charger that'll do like 2 amp. And I thought that's going to be more than sufficient. And then, of course, I used an old phone cable. And I think that's the problem. I think it's the fact that I used a phone cable. Because some of those cheap phone cables, they don't have very good wire. So it's like I think the length of it combined with the thickness of it, we got voltage drop again, just like I had with the bench power supply.
Yeah, I'd never seen anything like any issues like that. And I was talking to Ollie last night. He was doing some tests. You should probably talk to him as well, but he wasn't seeing any issues with the track and field stuff. But he's
mentioned that.
Yeah, I did persuade him to go and do some 4-layer boards. He was like, no, it'll be twice the price. I was like, are you sure? But he said, no, it will be. And he gave me some prices. I was like, oh, wow. But then when he said he went to check out, it ended up being exactly the same or quite close. So I just told him to do 4-layer boards. So it's 5-minute job to put a ground pour and a VCC pour on 2 planes and try it. So it's a way to test that. I suppose you can just for some of the games that we know work really, really well on 2-layer, why not use 2-layer? But if you've got something that's got some issues, then go for the 4-layer boards. I think he sells them on his Etsy shop.
Yes, yeah, I was going to show that, perhaps in this video actually. I was going to review that actually within this video. I was going to do a scope A14 and A15
Hmm.
with and without the copper tape, see if I can see anything there. I'm wondering if there might be a bit of ringing or something. I can't see what else the cause could be. I know Ollie did suggest, is it to do with, what I pointed out in the video, is it the actual devices? Is it the WinBond chips? But you see, I tried a few different types of chips. I tried some EPROMs, older ones like AMD. I tried some ST EPROMs, and exactly the same issue. So I do think it's just like a minor layout thing, and I think it's probably because of the length of those two connections and the fact they're jumpered. And obviously there's a few hops there in between, in the middle, so I'm going to test his respin of that board out anyway, so hopefully that problem will be solved. But it's the sort of thing that if you tried it on an original MSX, might not do it. You know, do you think maybe the slew rates and the CPLD? Because that was something that James, you know, from Retro HQ, he posted a comment just today on the previous video saying he wondered if maybe that was just complicating things a little bit.
I've got the slew set to slow. I always use slow.
Right. Okay.
The reason for that is it just causes ringing otherwise. Mind you, but then, I mean, I've used these CPLDs at 100 megahertz, and we're using it at 7. And
That's the thing. It's not high speed, is it? So you wouldn't expect this sort of problem.
in fact, no, this is 3 megahertz, isn't it? This is a 3 megahertz
Yeah.
system. So,
Three and a half, is it?
I mean, I've used the same design techniques as I would use for 100, and we're at 3. So, really, apart from the stupidity of putting the two clocks outputs together, I'm really not. And you know, we've got 4-layer boards.
Yeah.
It's
I was
big,
going to ask that, so yeah, that's good you confirmed that.
so it's a 4-layer board. To be honest, nowadays I can't be bothered with routing power lines. I just go power straight into the ground plane. It's just like you've got power everywhere. You don't need about it. But then the edge connectors will be getting power from the ground plane and from the power. There's an area at the beginning, near the CPLD, that's 3.3 volts, but everything else on the board is 5. So I mean, obviously worth trying everything, but Ollie and I aren't seeing any issues at all. And he has a TFM. You know, he was trying track and field with TFMSX with other MSXs as well.
Yeah. Strange, isn't it? Because hopefully you saw the summary at the end of the second episode there, where the power perfect, everything rock solid, stable, and I had that copper tape, remove it, doesn't work, put the copper tape back on, does work.
You and your copper tape, man.
I know. it's crazy.
I'm a wet finger guy. I just don't know. It starts working with a wet finger there, right, Cap?
Yeah, I did a bit of that as well after you suggested that. That was, you know, where we started off, where I was like putting my finger on various places on the board, but I did a bit of the wet finger as well. But yeah, I mean, it was good really that none of that made any difference, because it just showed that the TF board was not the issue at all. It's just flawless.
I don't know. That ARM chip that you got was probably sitting in a box, you know, loose.
Yeah, thank you for sending that, though. Even if it was, you know, I couldn't have got up and running without that, because, as you said earlier, the chip shortage means they're just impossible to find.
Yeah, and I think those caps around the RAM, I was going around, I was furiously adding bugs as I was watching that last video of yours to my bug tracker, but there's those caps are MLCC 22 microfarads, so they are the ones next to the video RAM, and I'll scatter a few more of them birdseed wise, but I don't want to put any big. I don't want to put anything that
stands up,
because it'll just get bumped by the. It'll just get bumped by.
And to be fair, I honestly don't know whether it really needs them or not. It's just like, say, that final bit of testing I did once I worked out I was getting a bit of voltage drop with the cable there, that I noticed that when adding those caps, I could reduce by a little bit, which made me think there was some sort of current dip thing going on. But
it's interesting, because with the ground plane, you'd expect you'd be getting 5 volts everywhere, and also. These chips should be tolerant to 4.9, 4.8. I mean, it shouldn't be. What that sort of suggests to me is that there's a ripple on the power supply that's causing it to actually occasionally dip to 4.6, 4.5. And that might be that we need something in the system is maybe not decoupled enough.
Yeah, I mean, from my experience, I found it was like super sulky when you got just below 5. You got down to 4.9, weird things would happen, like the graphics would flake out. But you see, it could be component differences, it could be VDP related or anything.
Well, the ARM and the CPLD are all off the 3.3 volt supply, and that's a linear reg, right? So that's, and I've not even done anything fancy like having a switch mode that can introduce ripple. Linear regs will just give you really, really stable stuff. And if you can go check that, but then the rest of the circuit is 5 volts. And that's one of the reasons I love those Xilinx chips, is because you can just marry them up to 5 volts, and
there's no issues.
And the STM32 is the same. It's brilliant that way. It's one of the lovely. It's 5 volt IO, 5 volt tolerant as well. So, not that we're actually using that like that just now, but let me think. There was so what I've got planned, I guess, is I want to put a switch on it so that I can switch between two sets of ROMs. So people could have it on 50 megahertz ROMs or 60 megahertz ROMs. So 50
hertz, 60 hertz,
yeah. ROMs. Just like a switch. And I also think you probably will have seen it yourself when you're using it. It's really annoying. There's no power switch.
yeah.
You have to unplug it and plug something in. And I think those are the two main features, and also fix all the bugs. Those are the two new features I think I'm planning on adding for the next revision of the board.
One thought I did think was about adding a crowbar, but again, I'm going back to the sort of things to do with some of these older systems now, just in case the 5 volts goes.
What is a crowbar?
Where you have like a Zener on there and a fuse, and you set the Zener to 5. I don't know. You have a 5.3 volt Zener or something, and if the power goes over 5.3, it'll just short out and blow the fuse. I don't know how easy it would be to stick a small Zener and a small 0-ohm link or something, because then if someone did something stupid.
Oh yeah, for sort of
just over
SCR, SCR
you could use an SCR. Yeah, that's a more efficient, better way of doing it, I guess.
Actually, that room, I'll have a think about that. I'll add that to my list of things to think about. What will probably happen is I'll go and have a chat to my mate who does a lot of this. Oddly, he started off doing software engineering and now he does hardware engineering, and he's got some seriously, like, he's got 6 gigahertz scopes and stuff like that. And I started off in electronic engineering and I do software engineering, so we kind of
yeah.
But this is my hobby, and he does software for his hobby. But he's really into he's now had to do some 6 gigahertz stuff, and he worked with my best man, and they did lighting for things like the Baku. They did all of the things on the Baku games. I can't remember which year it was. It might have been 2016 or something like that. Yeah. They did these fancy lights that the dancers were running around with, and they were changing while the dancers were they have to get all of these lighting systems to work in like an environment like a stadium. So they've got their analog and their high speed electronic stuff. So and they've been doing stuff for CE testing for EMC emission stuff. So, and they've got the gear to test that, like pre-test that before they go for the real test. So if I suspect there's something wrong with one of my boards, I just wander around and see Jamie and say, Jamie, it's not working.
Now, I just think that'd be a cool, maybe a useful thing, just in case someone connects up a stupid power supply. Because one of the things is, the DC jack, it's just like a Mega Drive or a CPC. Well, a CPC you'd be alright with because it's 5 volts, but, I could just imagine someone sticking 9 volts in there, 12 volts, just after they've received it from one of the builders.
Actually, looking at what you were doing, I was seriously thinking about putting a linear reg on there and just seeing...
just like a
using 9 volt supply.
Like that, or a 9 volt,
just to make sure that we're staying like that.
I mean, that would solve it, wouldn't it, without having an SCR or anything like that?
That was where I was probably heading with it, was something like that. Yeah. There is fuse protection on the USB port, there's 2 polyfuses there. That's all you need on there is 2 polyfuses, and it'll stop, because you get a surge because you've got 2 things on different grounds, and bang. Yeah.
It's amazing how much damage you can do with USB. Certainly on a PC, have you seen any of the horror photos where someone's had that sort of problem on a PC where it's not been protected? Obviously, the high currents involved with the power supplies on modern PC. You get fires started, the whole main board bursts into flames.
Yeah, I've heard of somebody connecting 2 things up, USB to USB, and it literally causing their TV card to go on fire.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? So yeah, that's really good that you got those polyfuses on there. So what about mounts? You mentioned that sort of earlier on. Are you going to be struggling to get any screw mounts and things on that board? You're going to have to make it larger.
It's going to be tight because everything's jammed up into the corners as much as possible. So I'll see what I can do. I can definitely put some things that you can put some feet on, but they might not be up into the corners.
Yeah,
we'll see.
I think even if it's just got 1 or 2 screw mounts somewhere, even if they're maybe diagonally opposite, or even one central somewhere or something.
Dead easy to put one there.
Yeah,
because there's plenty.
That'd be good.
I could probably put one underneath the joystick so that you could put the screw on, or you could put a foot on before you put the joystick port on. I don't know how well that would work.
Yeah.
I'll put it there. It might not actually be very useful. That corner is pretty jam tight with the
card edge. Yeah.
So probably try and find something dead in the middle of the board for support, because that's probably where the most likely to get some bending is when you're inserting the card.
Yeah.
So one thing I had thought about with this thing after a long time, sort of sitting looking at it, is it's about the same size as a handheld. So you could possibly have a real MSX, get a battery, get a screen, a 7-inch LCD screen, real car on the top if you got it right.
That would be so cool.
But obviously you can buy Raspberry Pis that could do the same thing, but there's just something about the real hardware. I don't know what it is.
Definitely, that will be so cool.
I think the reason I was doing that, I was asking one of the earlier bits. I could sort of circle back to. I think one of the early motivations was like, does anybody do like MSXs that are? He said, well, there's Raspberry Pis, there's FPGA implementations, but the problem with FPGA implementations, there's nothing wrong with FPGA stuff. It's just I've done FPGA stuff in the past myself, but I find it's just there's potentially bugs, and then there's open to interpretation of how you fix those bugs, and then you find that the FPGA goes out of stock or out of
end of life,
and then that's it. Like if you look at the MSX1, the original MSX1 thing, they're $1,000. just and they're less complicated than this.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that these will just be available. Hoping that people will build them. I know Goose is definitely in for it. And I spoke to 8-Bit Dreams. I don't want to vouch for these guys, but I spoke to 8-Bit Dreams at Amiga 37, and he's in for it. I showed him that. Actually, at Amiga 37, I had that running with Vampire Killer on it for a good couple of hours. Just people coming by, and there was a lot of people who came and played it. Actually, they were like, "Oh, so is this an accelerator for an MSX?" And I was like, "No." Oh, it's a computer. Oh.
Yeah, coming back to the screw mount things, one of the things I was going to say a minute ago is, where the joystick ports are on the front, might be able to do the same thing that Amiga did with the 2000 there on one of the ports, where you just cut one of the, the one in the corner, for example, joystick ports, where the connections are on the corner, the anchor points, put a screw through there, through the connector. Do you see what I mean? You can actually cut off the standoff, the actual ground mounting point. You just cut it off the connector, and you've got a screw hole that goes through the connector end.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah, that's possible. That's definitely Yeah.
Solves your problems on that side.
Go and look at my 2000 and have a look at what they've done, and I'll copy it blatantly. Yeah.
I mean, I think they used a specific connector, so we might not have the luxury of being able to find a connector that's got, a soldered terminal on one side and just a hole on the other. But cutting it off, anyone could fit that,
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Yeah, you can definitely just mod your.
So, yeah, there should be no issues with that. What about future? Do you think you might do a complete respin at some point with anything? What would you change? Is there anything you would change about it? Like add anything?
People have asked me for a cassette interface. I'm not sure. I think you asked me for a cassette.
Yeah, I think I was one of the people that asked, but I'm not sure either now.
I mean, yeah, I don't know.
Because there's nothing really missing, is there? This is the thing. It's like the cassette stuff I originally asked you about, because my first thought was, well, okay, how do I load some games? But as I've got more into understanding the MSX now, I've come to realise there's several of these like multi-carts, flash carts, and some of them, like the one I think you mentioned earlier, the Mega one, provides like a floppy emulation. And from what I understand, some of the floppy interfaces work through the cartridge port, don't they?
Yeah, and Arik, I mean, I haven't got it here, but Arik built me a floppy interface card.
Right.
So
That's
you
cool.
just plug it in and it's off it goes. You do need to have the DOS ROM installed, and that's how I'll set this up when this goes to ship. I'll set it up so you've got. I think the way that the ROMs work is there's a 32K ROM, then two 16K ROMs.
Yeah.
And the sub ROM for the MSX2 is 16K, and there's the main ROM is 32. I could be completely wrong. This might be 16 and 8, but
no, it's 32 and 16, I think.
yeah. And then there's a DOS ROM as well. So I'll set it up so it comes with the DOS ROM.
Oh, that will be cool. Yeah, you're answering things I was going to ask. I was going to ask about these ROMs. So
yeah, so the DOS ROM I'll definitely set up like that. So that you can then plug in a floppy controller through the cartridge port. I think that putting a floppy controller on, it would just add too much cost.
Yeah, and it's going to make the board bigger. Yeah,
for everybody, because what I want to do is put the minimum subset for. It's the same as I do on all my cards. It's like, what does everybody want?
Yeah, yeah.
And let's not add any more than that. Just
keep the cost down, simplify everything about it, really. And I think that's the right approach. And I do think you're right. What's the point in putting a floppy interface on there? It's just going to make the board bigger, more complex, more expensive.
How many people are going to use it?
Yeah, you can just buy a card that does it.
And I was also thinking, if you really want to be sitting loading stuff from, I might look at how to do something really cheap from cassette. Because if it can be done really cheap and all I have to do is put a headphone jack on it, then I'll do that. But I think the MSX has had a very complicated tape interface. From what I saw, it wasn't as simple as the ZX Spectrum one. But I think it could stop and start the tape. I think, could be completely wrong here, but if it was a really simple way of doing the cassette interface, I would do it. But I think if you really, really are that interested in loading stuff from cassette, you're probably going to buy a real MSX.
Yeah. On your all the testing you've been doing, have you come across any games that you've enjoyed playing, like games you've never seen before, heard before, that you just found a bit addictive?
Nightmare. That's just
I like that.
That's and I love Hoffman's port of it, but it's just not the same. It's a different game, but it's the same game. It's that the FM synth stuff on Nightmare is amazing. Just the tune off from the FM synth. You need an FM synth to be playing Nightmare, and I just love it. I love Nightmare, and I love Vampire Killer. I should
Killer. Yeah,
Killer is brilliant, but I shouldn't. But I really do like Vampire Killer. It's
I'm going to get some of these as original carts, invest in some of them, I think. How did you get the FM synth? How have you done that?
Oh, sorry, the FM synth is
Is it on the Mega?
The Yama.
Oh, you mean the PSG?
Yeah, sorry, PSG. Yeah, I just think it's got a way of sounding that's better than for the tunes that were written for it,
Yeah,
then
yeah,
it sounds better than the when it's ported over to the Amiga. For me personally,
yeah, yeah.
um,
And that's just reminded me of something, actually. It's just reminded of the 60 hertz thing, because I was thinking about Nightmare when I showed it in part one with the 9938 and stuff. It was in PAL, and I had a few people point that out, say, "Oh, I see you're running it in PAL." And then when I put the MSX2 Plus ROM on there, it's now running as 60 hertz.
yeah, it's totally set up by the ROM. The ROM
Right.
sets the
I didn't know
speed.
that. That's quite cool. So coming back to your point earlier about switchable ROMs, that'll be a nice feature.
Yeah, I think that was something that Ollie and I came up with. Like, if you have the ability to put all that ROM in there, why not just make it swappable? For example.
Yeah, and that's the situation I'm in at the moment, where I've got an 040. I've got 4 copies of the same thing effectively. Be
Yeah,
nice to have a couple of switches or something on there for that, or jumpers or something, pin headers, because then you can just stick your own wires on and
so
switches in your case somewhere.
I mean, we could have done it through the keyboard. We
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I guess,
could
yeah,
have done
yeah,
it through the keyboard, but I think just a simple switch might be simpler then, because
yeah.
I'm
Rather than
thinking,
over engineering.
yeah. I also was thinking, looking at what you were doing with the VDPs. I'd like to try and find a way of only having one jumper to switch
Yeah, I thought about that. Yeah,
between VDP 3.8, and so I thought I'd just take all those pins that you were, especially on the bit where you were talking about the video, the DAC output, and what that then became an input on the
yeah.
other VDP. I think I'll just wire them all to the CPLD and have a
Have it
switch.
intelligently switch everything. Yeah,
CPLD can set the volt. It won't be any signals, but it'll all be down to whether or not 3.3 volts will be enough for it to be um, high, because I can definitely bring them low or float them. I can set them to 3.3 volts high or low, and I think that's pretty much the combinations that were there. So I think I'll try that.
yeah. I think that one of them was a VDD pin, wasn't it though? So you might need a transistor or something to get the CPLD to switch that transistor to feed 5 volts into the VDD, maybe, or something like that.
Yeah, I wasn't. Yeah, don't know, don't know.
Yeah,
Um,
it might work with 3.3. I don't know. You might find you get some weird video issue or something.
Yeah, yeah, I might just switch it with the transistor. Then that might be simpler. But I hadn't. I mean, I've only been thinking about it since last night. But I was like, what I don't want to do is have 5 jumpers that you have to set in the right positions.
Yeah, yeah, I get that. Because
Because
people will inevitably get half of them round the wrong way and
I'll spend the
fry
rest of my
something
life,
or something
yeah,
like
and
that.
I'll end up spending the rest of my life going to stuff back, answering these questions on forums. There's things that, so yeah, so I want to try and make it as simple as possible. I'll try and make it idiot proof, but I'm sure somebody will manage to get past my idiot proofness. It always happens.
Yeah, the other thing I was going to say, when we're talking about games before, you said Nightmare was a favourite. The most important thing is, what does Callum think? Is he enjoying any of these games? Has
Yeah,
he played this system?
yeah, he plays Vampire Killer actually. Yeah.
Oh, cool. It's really good that
He
he's
really
into
loves
this
it.
stuff.
Daddy, can I play Vampire Killer? What was the other one he wanted to play? No, I can't remember. There was a couple of others, but Gradius, maybe Gradius as well. But he gets frustrated with that one pretty quickly. Nemesis 2.
Yeah, the Konami games are really good on this, aren't there? There's so many of them.
Yeah, the one that I think you particularly seem to enjoy it, and watching your video, and Ollie loves it, is King's Valley.
Yeah.
That game is diabolical. It's
One of
just
the things that got me with that is, when you get to like the second or third level, and it took me ages to work it out, there's more than one screen, isn't there?
yeah.
So, like, you collected all the gems, and you're like, is it broke? What's going on? Why is it not ended? I've collected all the gems, and then you just realise you can just walk off the side of the screen, and it flips to another screen.
The zombies can go faster upstairs than they can go.
Yeah, that drives me
Great.
nuts. I've been caught out a few times like that.
Yeah.
And also, it's trying to work out where to dig, isn't it? There's certain parts where you think, how on earth can I possibly get to that part there without trapping myself? Because that's the thing I always do, trap myself. You dig the hole, and you fall in, and then you get stuck.
Yeah, it's diabolical, that game.
It's a cool game, though, yeah. There's so many modern bits of homebrew as well for the MSX. It's a bit like the C64 in that sense, that there's quite an active, thriving community for that.
Yeah.
You might have seen on part 2 there was a clip there of Iridium. That's quite a cool MSX. I think that uses the scrolling, doesn't it, of the 9938.
No, I've not had a chance to play with that.
Yeah. There's so many. Check out Pack 01. Have you played that yet?
No.
That's really good.
I've got a limited set of cards here. Just trying to keep it to I've been buying the ones that are going to test like features. Like this one's got SCC on it. One of them are MS62 games. Ollie sent me some cards for some of his ones, and I've got some debug cards as well. But
when I get this next batch of PCBs, the ones that Ollie's redesigned, I'll send you some of those on car. But they're all things you can download. That Pack 01 you can download, Iridium you can download. The Operation Wolf I showed in the last video, that's a download as well.
That one looks amazing, yeah, because I've got the arcade of our Operation Wolf. I've got the arcade machine of Operation.
Yeah, I know. So jealous of that arcade machine. It's one of my favourite arcades. That I think the only thing that beats that for me is probably the Star Wars sit-down cabinet. The original one.
Well, those are so rare, though. They are
very rare these days. Super expensive as well. I think the last one I saw was selling for about £5,000.
I've got my Chase HQ and my Street Fighter 2. Those are my two favourites.
Oh, mega jealous.
I play them all the time. Those are the two I go to, and I've got an original Space Invaders as well.
Yeah, that's iconic.
But I've not had time to fix that one yet. With everything going on in the house this year, I haven't had a time to fix my Space Invaders.
I'm not surprised. You've been so busy.
Yeah.
Just with the house move, the MSX stuff, the TerribleFire Amiga stuff. It's absolutely incredible.
Yeah, and then we were at Amiga 37, and we had a whole display there as well, which was impressive. Just
was that the one that was in Germany?
Yeah.
That looked cool, like a really cool event. Might try and get to the next one if I can.
Yeah, with Amiga Bill, Dan Wood, Ravi Abbott.
Very cool.
Just hanging around in the lobby. All of us hanging around. Stephen Jones.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, found myself wedged into the back of Stephen Jones's Saab.
Was he the Checkmate guy?
Yeah, he's a Checkmate.
Yeah.
He's really tall and he's very London. He's a really great guy.
He's got a lot of cool Amigas, hasn't he?
Yeah.
Watch his videos. Yeah.
Chucky and I had a stand, and we were next to the Bifrost guys.
Oh yeah.
And beside them was Stephen Jones. So I had sat down typing on my laptop. I could hear the speakers from his, his new speaker system from his Checkmate monitors. I really want one of them, but I'm just a bit skint at the moment.
It's the same here. Yeah. They look really nice, don't they? Just it's a bit expensive at this time of year. That's the main thing.
Oh, and thanks for that. I have not done anything with that SNK yet. With that, Yes, the MBS. I've got it all set up, but I need to finish the cab. And the problem was the cab. After I built it, I noticed that there's a curve in the plywood, and it's just I couldn't get it straight. So I'm gonna buy another bit of plywood, and I'm gonna use a router to trace round what I've already got, and then hopefully get straight ply. I bought ply from Dewson's like an idiot. I need to go buy it from somewhere better than Dewson's, to be honest. That's what I need to do.
Yeah, so thank you ever so much for creating the TerribleFire MSX. It's just wonderful. It's it's incredible that you've shared this with me. Yeah, it's just a privilege, it really is.
Problems. You seem to be doing a lot of my boards, so it seemed to be on brand for you to be.
They're so good. This is why. They're so good.
Well, they're meant to be simple. They're meant to be really easy.
They are, but at the end of the day, they're so powerful. They do everything we want. It's like it's just incredible. Yeah,
I do keep getting pushed to put more and more features on them, but then if I do that, then I've done that with the 4060. I've put more features on it, and it's just caused it to become more difficult to get finished. And I think
that's the danger, isn't it?
Yeah.
Simple. What's the saying? Keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah. Yeah, so I probably won't make anything as complicated as the 4060 ever again. But and I pretty much like the feature set on the MSX. I think it's really simple, really does the job. And
Perfect. Yeah,
gateway drug to get a real MSX. What?
definitely, definitely.
Yeah, what I need now is a sharp 68000 X68. That's the
Please
only.
don't remake one of those, because I'll be like first in the queue wanting to buy one. Because
Yeah,
those are so expensive. Those are
they
so
are.
expensive.
They are really expensive,
Yeah.
and probably the only way I'm going to ever own one is if I make one. So.
Yeah, I wonder if I could be done in an FPGA maybe with a proper 68K CPU and bits of RAM and stuff around it.
I I don't know what the architecture is, and the bit that
It's
would
pretty
drive.
powerful hardware, isn't it,
Yeah,
for its era?
it's an arcade with an operating system.
Yeah,
That's pretty much what it is. Yeah,
yeah. Oh,
yeah.
I'm going to be giving you ideas now. No, don't do don't do a sharp
Well, it's
68,000.
somewhere between a Neo Geo it's a bit like a Neo Geo, isn't it?
It
Really, it's
is. It is.
Neo
Yeah.
Geo with an OS. Yeah.
Certainly in terms of the raw power of what it can do.
So
68K,
I've got
isn't it?
no more I've got no more projects. I'm starting no more projects until some of them get finished. That's what I've got a kind of like a ban on
Yeah.
starting projects. I want to finish the 4060. I want to finish the MSX. Those two are the top of the list. Then there's some bugs in the 360, the TF360. You
Yeah.
got PCBs for that? Have you
I
built one?
don't. I don't have a 360. I'd like to get one or buy one from you at some point if you get a batch.
I will do better than that. I'll get Super Duper to send you a blank PCB.
Brilliant! Wow, fantastic! Thank you. That's wonderful.
I haven't got any blanks, so I'll get Super Duper or Goose to send you a blank PCB, and you can do a video on it.
That's
Because
great. I think I just happen to have a couple of the CPLDs left that because it's the same one as the
that's
1260, is it?
that's the thing about my stuff is like it's like if you've got the inventory from
Yeah, you can build multiple of the
yeah,
different models.
so try to stick to the same inventory,
Is it
and
the
then,
288?
yeah, the 288s, yeah.
Yeah,
So
brilliant. I've got two of those, so just enough, hopefully.
no worries. And what else? So 360, and then there's the 2040.
Oh, I was going to ask about that. So is that still on the cards at some point?
It is. I did try and get it to boot. There is some bugs, and to be honest, I went. You know what? If I go into this, it's a deep rabbit hole for a while.
Yeah, yeah.
Really want,
Distracting from these other things.
and I want to finish some other things. I've even got on the bench right now the 536. I've been fixing bugs with that recently as well.
Yeah, I have to apologise. In that other video, I said I was about to update the firmware. I haven't done it, but I'll do it. I'll do it today. Promise. I'll do it today. To
That'll,
test that CDTV firmware.
yeah, that's the CD. Well, that fixes. That would fix. I think that fixes some ZZ9000 incompatibilities as well
Right.
as quite a few problems with. It was a problem that was highlighted by the A570, the CD drive. It was this SRAM in it. There was an issue with it. It was corrupting the SRAM. And as soon as I
Okay.
got the scope, I saw it like in 5 minutes. I was like, oh, that's easy. Fix that. Oh, that's happening because of that. Right, sorted. So I can't pronounce his name, but it was a lad from the Netherlands sent me. I literally cannot pronounce his name. Look at it.
Yeah, I'm not very good at foreign names pronunciation.
A lad from the Netherlands sent me an A570, and I normally wouldn't accept, but he'd taken some of the code I'd reverse engineered for the CDTV and produced a new driver for it completely, but he just used what I'd done as a
Yeah.
reference. It made it more sensible. So I'd resourced the CDTV driver so that it was broken up so you could see how it all worked, and he produced a new one so that it wasn't using fast memory on this 536 for DMA. So that
Yeah.
all fixed all those problems. But there was still a bug with the bookmarks, and so he sent me it, and I've sorted on the A570, and that's all sorted now. That's all working. So
Cool.
there is definitely an update. It's definitely worth having. It's probably it was just a ringing DTAC. DTAC was bouncing, and
Right. Okay.
and what happened was it was causing a glitch that the 030 was reading twice. It was reading the wrong side of the bus. And I don't know how it ended up happening. It's probably just an internal thing that you can glitch and make the 030 do that. but it was happening reliably. So I fixed it. I just made it latch low and put a bit of thesis on it.
Cool. So
pretty easy to solve, but it was just a nightmare for the.
So I'll test that, but for me it'll just be a bit of regression testing really, because I haven't got a 570 and I've got a CDTV, but I'll just make sure it works on all the stuff I've got here.
Yeah, especially the 2000, everything on the 2000 might be a bit better as well. Because
yeah. I don't know whether you saw that small update I pushed out on that was a DTAC problem I worked out on that Rev 4. My Rev 4 2000, the resistor size that Commodore had on there wasn't low enough to pull it high.
Right, so that's a standard problem with all 68,000 machines, is that your DTAC goes low and then it just takes a week to come back up, and then it's a cycle overlap. So I didn't see that one. I didn't see that video, but this update might solve DTAC issues on 2000
in general. Yeah, and that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that there could be some overlap there on that the video I did the other day, because I had an interesting comment on that video. One of the guys was saying there was a saying about pulling DTAC low at something. It's like a common thing that people sort of jested about in the 90s. If you want, if your machine was fast enough and you just pulled DTAC low, it could run without any wait states effectively. It just it would run fast. There'd be no waiting kind of thing.
Ooh. Okay, that I think my logic, I wouldn't want to bet on it, but might work. But it's as long as you haven't got any devices that have wait states.
Yeah. And I think actually the thing that sort of fits with that is that video you haven't seen where I fixed the DTAC on the Rev 4. The TerribleFire 536 was running like lightning. The music on Agony was like 3 or 4 times faster than it should be, and it just ran. And I think the issue there is like it was almost, DTAC just wasn't being pulled high, so it's like just wasn't waiting. I might try it. I might just pull a DTAC to ground at some point or disconnect it.
That sounds more like an interrupt issue, though.
Yeah, it was given an interrupt problem.
Yeah. There is a general interrupt issue with 536, and I've got what I've been testing here today was somebody reported Walker isn't working. A WHD load Walker isn't working. Oh, right. This has been a rabbit hole, and I'm even talking to the WHD load guys about it. But what's happened is Walker, you play it and it crashes after a minute. And it's crashing because interrupt level 6 is happening, which it shouldn't be. And interrupt level 6 is happening is because when Agnes? No, it might be Gary and Paula or whoever it is that sets the PL lines is transitioning from, well, I've got an interrupt level 2 now, and now an interrupt level 4 has happened because it's some audio that buffer needs to be refilled. The transition is causing a glitch that the 030 is seeing. It's a bit like what you were saying with the DTAC. One of them's coming down quickly and the other one's going back up slowly. So it's transitioning slowly, and the 030 is going at 50 megahertz, so it can see that. So it sees interrupt 6. It triggers an interrupt level 6, and interrupt level 6 points to somewhere where there's an illegal instruction.
Right.
Now, but it shouldn't have an illegal instruction there, because as I'm looking through the code, I've actually gone so far into this thing as to look. The game actually sets up an interrupt level 6 handler, but WHD load is actually something to do with, it's not WHD load's fault, but whatever's calling the WHD load like file loader is something to overwrite the interrupt
handler. Right.
And nobody's ever seen this before, because only an 030 running at 50 megahertz in a it's going to see that. So so it's one of those 3 or 4 things have gone wrong here, and at the same time, I'm
gonna have a play on that later, because you know what, I'm sure I've played Walker, and I'm sure I got more than a minute in.
I think, with the 536, and I asked Alan Marks Alan PPC. He was the one who reported it to me. I said, "Can you try it with the 534?" It happens with the 534 as well.
Oh, right.
So it might be, I don't know. I've reported it to the
WHD load scene
guys, and I'll be adding more and more information on it. But that's been my last 24 hours, is figuring that out. And now I want to get back to the TFMSX. I've got a big weaving basket of wires under here with a 500, and I've tried loads and loads of things to try and stop it. Try and stop
Yeah,
it.
stop that problem
But
recurring.
unless I think maybe some pull-ups on the IPL lines would be maybe some
Yeah,
really really vicious ones might like 200 ohm type, 300 ohm type pull-ups would help. But yeah,
but will it break anything else? That's the question, isn't it?
I don't know, but you don't want to be I think it's the last thing I want to be doing is see. I thought it was to do with the so I don't know if you remember, like on older cards, you had to have a fly lead from the card to
Yeah,
the
to int 2 and int 6.
to, and Alan Marks had said to me that a load of people were killing their Amigas trying to solder those headers on. So I tried to find a way to emulate to get rid of that, and I've got a dirty hack on the 536. It's a dirty hack, no two ways around it. It's a dirty hack that saves Amigas, so I can live with it.
Yeah, there's the man in the middle.
Yeah, it's man in the middle thing, and I thought that was causing the N6. But if I get rid of that whole stuff and just run it from a floppy, it still has that problem. It's just I was at this for a couple of days trying to figure out what on earth's going on with this. One game, it overwrites 2 bytes of the interrupt handler. It's like a buffer overflow thing.
Yeah.
Loading data in Walker. Anyway, I don't know. It's the decrunched version of Walker I was looking at, trying to figure it out and trying to figure out. It's probably something I can reduce from. If I subtract 1 from the number that it's trying to load data-wise, it'll be fine. But yeah, I've not got there yet. I'm deep into it.
Well, good luck.
So
I hope you can work that out. It's good that you're persistent enough to want to, help resolve these problems rather than just.
Yeah, the thing is that I mean, I especially the 536 because I really want the 536 to be
perfect.
I really want I want it to be supported. I want it to be like not a fire and forget. There's an 030 card. The 536 I made absolutely no money on at all. I think maybe the first batch of PCBs I sent out blank, I got my money back for the development cost, and that's it.
Yeah.
And it's everywhere, and everybody's who wants a real 030 in their 500 or CDTV or whatever, they've got one. So, but I don't want to support the older ones because I think this is a better card. So I want to make sure that this 536 is pretty well sorted out, and I'll keep supporting that one indefinitely. That one, the 1260, because there's so many of them out there now. I think there's over 1,000.
Yeah, I think those are the kind of established platforms, aren't they? Everyone's migrated towards those exact 2 models. And they're very good. They're so stable, so powerful, and all the rest of it. There's very few bugs, if anything. It's incredible you've managed to find this issue with a 536, because I would have said it was perfect, to be honest.
Well, it's like a combination of there's a bug in the game, there's a bug. And I think it's a bug in the WHD load slave is probably the way of putting it, and it triggers something in the 536 that's a little bit, you could argue
an oddball scenario that would never occur. Probably it's like this is the thing; it's never occurred until you've run it at 50 megahertz, the 030.
Yeah, even a spurious interrupt every now and again is probably not going to be a big problem. But yeah, it's nothing to do with the man in the middle stuff. I thought it was, but the whole idea was I was just trying to find ways of not killing.
Yeah, not killing CIAs and things.
Yeah, the 1260 will be supported for as long as I can. So for as long as I'm around, anyway. But the bit I love is the fact that when I joined the scene about 2015, 2016, you couldn't get an 030 accelerator. You could, but they were expensive. They were obscure. There was people who made them weren't around anymore.
That's certainly the case with the 060 boards as well. They're just crazy money, and as you say, just impossible to find.
And now, if you want anyone who wants one can have one.
Yeah.
If it's not availability is there. So
it's wonderful. You've done an amazing job. So grateful. I can't thank you enough, really.
That's all I wanted, was just to get everybody to a baseline. Just everybody can get a 30, everybody can get an 060 if they want it on every machine, except the 600, because I don't like the 600.
I don't either, which is why I haven't got one yet, but I will do. I'll get one.
I haven't got. I have got a 600. It was my first Amiga. It's completely unexpandable.
Is that why you don't like it?
Yeah, but I think I can justify saying I don't like it because it was my first Amiga. It was the one I got. It was the one I got back in the day, back in the 1993
Oh,
or
that's
9.
incredible. You've kept it all that time.
Yeah,
I've kept all my systems. So many of us have just got rid of them over the years.
still got my Spectrum Plus 3.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
That's dedication. Absolute dedication.
And I think I've still got my Multiface 3. My old Multiface 3.
Those have got to be pretty rare these days.
Yeah, but it's an original Multiface 3, which is amazing. I love that. I learned so much on that system. So, yeah.
But yeah, what you've done is amazing. I think all the work you've done with TerribleFire over the last, it must be 6 or 7 years now at least.
6 years.
It's just incredible. It's changed the shape and the face of the Amiga scene, really.
That was the plan, just to make everybody able to get it.
Yeah. You've made such huge waves, though. It's like I say, we were talking earlier about prices of things like CD32s and 060s. So it's like just those are just some of the huge waves that you've made just in the markets and things. Well, I'll let you get your lunch. It's been really good to speak to you, Stephen. Yeah, hopefully next time I'll be a bit more relaxed like we have been through the second half of this conversation.
No worries.
Okay.
Right. I'll talk to you later.
Have a good day. All right. Speak to you later.
Bye.
So, Stephen, thank you for doing that interview. I'm so sorry it took 9 months to get that video up. I've just had so much stuff on the bench, as I'm sure you've seen in some of the previous things we've been working on. Just before this video went live, Stephen did an amazing presentation at RMC, actually, so there'll be a link down below. It's highly recommended. If you're interested in any of the stuff that Stephen's been working on, watch that presentation. Anyway, I do hope you found the video interesting. If you'd like to support the channel, please see the Coffee and Patreon links down below. We'll come back soon to do some more things that Stephen sent me, actually. There's a few little bits he sent me, and we've got a TF360, so yeah, thanks for watching.